I'm ahead of the curve. In this book review, I will be discussing Jonathan Safran Foer's Eating Animals, Should We Stop? First published in 2009. To give some context for newer viewers of my channel, I've been a vegan for 7 months now, so in many ways this book is already talking to the converted. However, I still view these topics and the topic of veganism very critically as much as I can. I don't view it from as much of an emotional argument as I do a philosophical one, to do with ethics, for example. So I've already read Animal Liberation by Peter Singer, and my review is already up of me reading that a few months ago now. And this is the second book that I've read on the topic of veganism or animal agriculture, factory farming, basically how we impact animals through what we consume or what we put our money into, essentially, for our lifestyle, I suppose. So what I liked about this book to begin with was it was very easy to read. And this is because it starts off with a very sort of friendly, accessible, personal journey from eating meat to vegetarianism. And this was brought on by the author's grandmother cooking meat, and I think it was like a babysitter or something like that, a carer of some sort, explaining why she doesn't eat meat. And the response was, "I don't like eating hurt animals." And according to the author, this struck him pretty hard, and he used that idea to build a foundation against consuming animals. He even admits that this book is more of a story than anything. It isn't a very, well, it is a factually based book. However, its prose is written in a very literary way, in the sense that, like I said earlier, it's very accessible, very easy to read, precisely because it's told as if it's a story of our, I suppose, lifestyle, what we do in humanity. So it isn't a very dense book in that regard. It doesn't feel very dense. I read this in a few days. It's very short. Well, I mean, I consider this very short. It's like 250 pages long, or at least in my copy it is. And yeah, I mean, for me personally, I just flew through this book because of how, look, I say it's easy to read, but in the other sense, emotionally, it's not, because obviously he's talking about how many animals die because of factory farming, and obviously he's talking about the processes of which they have to go through in order to get food on our plates. And so the main premise of this book is why we should stop eating animals. In terms of whether this book answered this query very well, I would say that it did, because what it did really well throughout is using different modes of persuasion, or at least arguments, to put across this overarching point of how we should stop and prevent animal suffering through the factory farming and so on. I enjoyed how he didn't leave out fish, that, you know, nothing was left out. He talked about how, I mean, I won't go into it in depth in this video because there is a lot to say on the way in which fish are killed for our consumption. But, for example, a net is thrown in the water, and there are so many more species that are caught in this net, like dolphins, octopi, that unfortunately die out of us wanting to just catch that salmon. And it's well known as well for a while that cod is dying out. It's an endangered species at this point. The methods to catch these fish are not only inhumane, because fish do feel pain, and they are also, by the way, their memory isn't as bad as that myth of, you know, like a goldfish having a bad memory. Yeah, that is a myth, as I alluded to there, a complete myth. Fish do feel pain. They do have a memory. They can recognize other fish that they swim with. So it's not like they are just machines, as Descartes tried to put across in the, well, a few centuries ago now. And I brought up this whole point in my animal liberation review because, well, to bring it up here briefly, Descartes believed through his philosophy that animals didn't feel pain, and so this, in some regard, justified lots of people to torture animals and to study them in that sense. And that was a very, very bad time for animals, I have to admit that. Although, arguably, it's even worse now because killing them has become on a mass scale. I mean, before there'll be ranches. I mean, for example, the statistic is that 99% of our animal consumption comes from a factory farm, and that 1% comes from an actual individually sourced farm. And so everything is done on a mass scale, and people like Cosmic Skeptic, Joey Carbstrong, Earthling Ed would say that the way that which these animals are killed is similar to that of a concentration camp style of mass murder. And I would have to agree, because the way in which we get milk, for example, is just very depraved. We have to forcibly insert objects into them, to the female cow, and we have to extract their milk. So we have to essentially make sure that they keep on having children, and then we take away the mother cow to then eat. And there's also videos online of like calves running after their mother, sulking, crying, making noises, because cows do feel the sense of grief. They do feel pain. Again, this is contrary to what a lot of people are actually aware of, and this point overall is considered towards the end, which is most people don't actually know what goes on in factory farms. They don't actually know the detail of what happens. I mean, it's like, oh, well, cows are bolted in the face and they're dead. Well, it's not really that simple, because most of the time they don't actually die from the initial bolt. A lot of the time their spines are cut and they're bled to death, and I don't know, this is getting quite graphic, and I didn't really want to intend it to be like this, but how can it not be graphic if the implications of us eating meat produces such a thing, right? So I'm trying to give you a fullest picture of what I picked up in this book, and maybe to just skip along, I suppose, I have found no ethical argument for eating meat. And you might well say, well, that's right, because why would there be an ethical argument for killing an animal if you're, going to be that sympathetic? We don't need to eat meat to survive. Some people do, some people have dietary restrictions. Whilst I think that animals aren't on the same platform as humans, metaphorically speaking, that doesn't give us an excuse to murder and torture them through our mass execution-style camps, factory farms. And yeah, I mean, I don't know how much I want to go in depth with this video, because I'd feel like I'd be repeating myself from the podcast, but obviously many of you may not watch it. So, but going back to the book, it's a very well-written book, and he doesn't shy away from giving such details, and there's also statistics, and there's notes on where to find the resources for these statistics, and there's also testimonies from dairy farmers and factory farmers. I found that very, very interesting, because a lot of them do express grief over what they have to do, but on the other hand, they can like animals, but also cut their throat, for example. And look, I see where they're coming from, because I suppose you have to separate your personal liking for that animal to your professional job, but to me, they shouldn't be separated, because they're both, well, I mean, killing. You could say that example for the Nazi guards. Oh, well, I was just doing my job. How many of us would confirm that to be the case, or even a permissible moral claim? No one would. It's absurd, and I view this in the same light. I don't think that you really can love animals, as many claim to do, if you eat them. Now, you may say, oh, well, I only love dogs. Well, I'd ask, why do you only love dogs? Why not pigs as well? Because pigs are much more intelligent than dogs. And this is the thing. If we are to base off of our eating of animals from sentience, let's say, then we would not eat a lot of the animals that we do, if not most of the animals that we do. I mean, mammals, as we are one, are very capable, sentiently speaking. And so, the octopus, the cow, as I said, the pig, they're all very intelligent animals, yet we justify killing them because they taste nice. This is acceptable if we are living 2,000 years ago in caves and we don't have the resources to have a supermarket to pick out plant-based products. But again, this is a red herring. If we can eat vegan, why aren't we? From a moral perspective, I mean. And the answer to that, well, there is none. Because as far as I'm concerned, it's especially on the religious side. I mean, why don't scriptures include any comment on the unfairness of a tree falling on a deer and injuring that deer, so they then starve to death? Christianity, Islam, they don't even comment on the theodicy of animal suffering. This is quite a contradiction for a loving God. So this is how far it stems. Even to religion, there is a contradiction here. And not only to religion, but our actual lifestyles in general. So, yeah, I don't talk about veganism that much in comparison to how many other people do who are vegans, because I think that gives off a uncomfortable vibe. But I wouldn't say that is the fault of the people advocating for it. I'd say that is because people are very much cognitively dissonant of the implications of their immoral actions. And I think that is disingenuous, but at the same time, I can't blame someone if they haven't looked into it, right? So, yeah, I mean, these are my initial thoughts off of reading this book. I would highly recommend it overall. It's very easy to read, apart from, obviously, it being emotionally disturbing at times. But the author has many anecdotal claims and many statistical claims. And really what he does is, obviously, tackle the moral stance of, well, if all of this is true, if we don't need to eat animals, why are we? Once more, I don't know how much I want to go into the philosophy or the moral implications of veganism, or maybe even the counter-arguments from many of the claims against veganism, because not only do I mention these on my podcast, The Bastard Sons of Oedipus, but I also feel that this video might get a bit too, I don't know, comprehensive and repetitive maybe, because I have once more mentioned some of these points in Animal Liberation by Peter Singer, which, by the way, I would recommend as well as this book. But if you are beginning to look into veganism, if you don't know as much about veganism, then this book, Eating Animals, Should We Stop, is the one for you, I'd say. Animal Liberation is good. However, I would argue that it more focuses on, well, it's obviously much more factually dependent. Not to say that this isn't, but the prose is much more to the point, whereas this book can, well, as I said, it's written in a storytelling-like way, but at the same time, not being a fiction or anything, I don't want to give off the wrong impression. This book is very much grounded in reality, but it tells the facts in an engaging and easy to read way. I can't stress that enough, because I know that when reading a subject as heavy as this, it's very important to make sure that we don't have to stop every few seconds and regain ourselves. I mean, I had to do the same when I read The Rape of Nanking and the Earth is Weeping, about the Native Americans, about how their land was taken from them, everything was taken from them. And these historical books are very emotional, and this book in itself is as well, because no punches are pulled. But I think that that's a good thing, because it forces you to confront the implications of your behaviour. And again, this book was talking to the already converted. However, I think that this is an incredibly good piece to start with, and a great introduction to the topic. So, yeah, I think I'll leave it there. I would highly recommend this book. I would say if you haven't looked into veganism and you do eat meat, try and look into it a bit and see what you think. I'd recommend watching Earthling Ed on YouTube, Cosmic Skeptic, Joey Carbstrong. All of these guys are really, really good in that area. And if you're more interested in the philosophical arguments for veganism, then the Cosmic Skeptic, as many of you may already know him, he's great in that regard. And he's inspired me a lot as well to be vegan. I mean, he was one of the main catalysts of me being a vegan, because before I was against veganism. For example, my main argument was that but by eating soybeans or soy products, we deforest. And whilst that is true, 85% of soy deforestation goes directly to animal agriculture. So the problem isn't soybean foresting, it is where and why those soybeans are being produced in the first place. And so if we take the animal agriculture out of the equation, well, we can quite easily see that the cause and effect of eating meat just gets worse and worse. If we were all vegans, COVID-19 never would have even happened, for example. Again, I do recommend, if you are new to this scene of philosophy or moral argument, or just veganism as an idea, I'd recommend you not only read this book, but you check out the other YouTubers that I've discussed, and maybe, if you haven't already, look at my Veganuary video and my Animal Liberation by Peter Singer video as well. It's a really, really interesting topic, and for me at least, when I found out that there was no really good argument against veganism, I found that if I were to not be vegan, I'd not be able to live with that, because I now know the truth behind it, and I know that there is no good argument against veganism, being vegan. But I'm also not saying that this is black and white. I think that if you just try the substitutes, or at least you try some recipes that happen to be vegan without any substitutes even, if you just give it a go, I mean, this is what I say to people, it does help. You can still eat meat, but obviously it's better to be vegan, but you can still just cut out one meal with meat out of your diet every week. Not only will you just save an animal by reducing the supply and demand of that meat or the industry, you will also, generally speaking, become much healthier. I have not seen an overweight vegan before, right? The health benefits for being vegan are just unprecedented, and that's one of the main positives that I encountered when I first became vegan. I just lost a lot of weight in a good way, and I became a lot more healthy. So it was actually the beginning of me being more conscious about my health, which was a really positive thing as well. But maybe I'm just sidetracking here. But yeah, check out this book. Really do. And I think veganism is not to be dismissed. I think that it's definitely a controversial topic, but it's controversial because the implications of it are evidently important. I've been ahead of the curve. Thank you so much for watching this review. My social media links are in the description below, and I'll hopefully see you in the next video. Au revoir.